Metacognition is most associated with the theorist John Flavel, who is to the left, who proposed that metacognition consists of metacognitive knowledge and experiences or regulation. Essentially, it's thinking about thinking. It is a system that helps a person understand or control his own or her own cognitive performance. The benefits of metacognition are for successful learning. It also will support educators in producing or providing students with activities that would promote metacognition in order to develop and determine their metacognitive skills or their ability to think about their thinking. Metacognition is this reflection on active control and engagement in the learning process. Metacognition does allow for students and individuals to take charge of their own learning, and it is promoting an awareness of how you learn and what you need in order to be successful. Part of what we as teachers try to do is to try to teach students about their learning process and to help them build their self-efficacy skills, because building self-efficacy will ultimately lead to higher motivation, which will lead to learning success. There are two processes of metacognition. The first is knowledge of that cognition, which there are then three components of it. We have to be aware of the factors that influence our performance, the different types of strategies to use for learning, and knowing what strategies to apply in each situation. The second process of metacognition is the regulation of that cognition, which requires setting goals and planning, and then monitor and controlling that learning, and then finally evaluating or reflecting on the results of that learning.
Cognition is the realm of thinking. Metacognition is the realm of thinking about thinking, not thinking about the phenomenon of thought in general or the nature of knowledge in the philosophical sense, but reflecting on your own thinking process. If cognition is what happens in your mind while you're engaged in learning, metacognition is what happens in your mind when you're engaged in monitoring and managing your learning. Consider painting a self-portrait. There are two levels of activity. There's painting, the touch of the brush to the canvas. Then there's metapainting, the painter's awareness and regulation of the painting. As the metacognitive painter reflects on his work, he draws on his knowledge of painting in several ways: an awareness of what colors complement each other, an understanding of which brushstrokes produce different effects, and the discernment of when to apply different techniques and use certain brushes to achieve the desired result. The reflective painter also manages his own painting as he goes along. He is mindful of how he plans to use the space of the canvas. He monitors his progress to make sure he is staying on track. And he evaluates his work, constantly checking that the paint on the canvas reflects the image on his mind and in the mirror. Whether it's painting or the knowledge and skills of any other discipline, we want our students to not only be critical and creative thinkers, but also to become reflective about their learning. As students face an ever-increasing demand on their attention and an ever-broadening world available for consideration, an important part of helping them think for themselves is helping them think about their own thinking.
Interestingly enough, you probably demonstrate metacognition every single day, and our students also demonstrate aspects of metacognition every day. Different examples of metacognition would be knowing our limits, knowing what we can memorize and what we cannot, monitoring. For example, maybe we're concept mapping and then we say, oh, this isn't working, I need to do something else. Noticing that you comprehend something that you just read and realizing I don't need to outline this or review this or go back to this. Perhaps you're reading and you're skimming subheadings because you understand the topics or the topics aren't of relevance to you. That is another form of metacognition. Repeatedly rehearsing a skill in order to gain proficiency, practice, practice, practice. The idea that practice doesn't make perfect, but practice makes better. And then self-assessing and seeing how well you've learned something. All of these are aspects of metacognition that we demonstrate on a regular basis. There are some strategies for metacognition, strategies that we can employ in our classroom in any situation at any grade level, such as asking questions or accessing mentors or experts, solving problems as a team or working collaboratively, thinking aloud, encouraging reflection, and most importantly, allowing for errors and understanding that errors are just our first attempts in learning, and that it's important that we have to have a growth mindset and work through our errors. Here are some strategies for using metacognition in the classroom.
So what exactly is the value of metacognition in the classroom? Well, as teachers, we expect our students to take in all of the information in the curriculum. We rarely spend time actually showing them how to learn this information. We're always looking for new ways to keep our students engaged and interested, and metacognition can help this. If a student has good metacognitive skills, then they can take ownership for their own learning and not just wait to be spoon-fed all the information from the teacher. A lot of research shows that students associate success with pure good luck, but unfortunately they associate failure with a lack of ability. If we can show students how to take control of their learning, then they can see that there's a lot of things they can do to affect the results of this so-called lottery for good results. Metacognition can be very important for students with special educational needs and also gifted and talented students. For example, someone whose special needs affects their ability to keep organised and to comprehend new information can benefit from this metacognitive training. This might be just focusing on skills that help them to get organised and to monitor their own progress. As we said, it's also very important for gifted and talented students. It can promote self-discipline and also remove the myth that students feel they have to get everything right the first time. One of the main things being that they can come to realise that mistakes are not the end of the world, but can also be an important learning experience and can lead to improvement. There's a number of ways in which we can promote the use of metacognition in the classroom. For example, by allocating specific time for planning activities before we take them on, allocating time for reviewing at the end, and also praising the use of evaluation, planning and monitoring.
Here we see some examples of students working in teams. Metacognition allows for or promotes students working together, bouncing ideas off one another, and being in an environment that allows them to be creative and collaborative. In order to do that, they also need to be able to explore, to innovate, and to make mistakes. It's also a metacognitive strategy to assist students in setting goals. So if you have an exam coming up or you have some major tests coming up, you could have students set goals. Here's an example from a student who's in 10th grade who, as we're preparing for the end of the year and we're preparing for our fourth quarter, we asked some of our 10th graders things that they can do to help finish the year strong academically. This student talks about having good time management, being engaged in class, and putting the most important or the hardest work first. Another strategy is, or another metacognitive skill, is understanding your effect on other people and what you can do to help other people finish the year strong academically. And the student writes about helping students with work if they need it. This student talks about not falling back on studies, especially right before finals, or remembering that once finals are done, that they get the summer off. Having a motivation at the end and using that motivation is always a positive aspect of metacognition. This student talks about that they want to focus more on schoolwork other than Fortnite. And as many of you know, in the upper levels, Fortnite is a distraction. And so this student talked specifically about trying not to be distracting and be distracted. I find this really interesting that one of the things that he feels that he can do to help his classmates is to not be the person that is distracting other people. That understanding of who he is and that understanding of his effect on other people is a part of his metacognition. That we can support students is to help them understand how they learn best, when they learn best, what they need in order to be successful, and also what they don't need in order to be successful. So listen to these students share how they like to prepare for their major assessments or how they like to study.
Usually I don't study, but if I were to study, probably in my flex period with Jeremy, we usually like to study in our flex period for stats. I feel like that's the best place to study, so we can do a little bit each and every day.
So for me, I study best usually alone. Sometimes I can have music playing softly in the background, but I normally can't because I need to focus and I get distracted easily. And I also just need to set aside time to really focus on it.
Basically, I gotta write everything out, but I can't memorize it. I gotta actually internalize it.
Pretty much like to study by myself. That's where I'm best. I'm not that good at the multiple choice, so that's something I really need to practice before the test.
Good job. Thank you. So I like studying in groups a lot. I feel like talking it through with people is really helpful, but when I study alone, I listen to music. I use Quizlet a lot for vocab terms, and then I like looking up practice tests on whatever lesson I'm trying to understand better.
Oh, anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I actually need the TV on when I'm studying. I like background music, but not music. I like people talking in the background.
Well, I like to study in my bed. I know that's not the best place to study, some people say, because then you can't sleep well in it, but it's just comfortable for me, and I can spread out all my papers and stuff.
I like to get a good basis in class and really pay attention, not kind of just doze off, so that when I get home and I'm studying by myself, I can know all the things we did. Because if I get stressed out at home, I'm definitely just going to quit and not finish studying.
I study well with by myself or with a group, and when I'm by myself, I kind of
have to make sure that I space out everything and manage my time well.
Yeah, for me, I'm down with cramming. It doesn't bother me. Just rewrite my notes in color, of course, because it helps me memorize them.
I need to study a little bit every night because I cannot sit down and study for hours at a time and focus for that long. And also, just need to study with myself because it's also hard to focus in groups for me.
In reflection, metacognition is the understanding of one's learning process and the understanding that learning is a process. We need to think about our thinking, understand what we need, but most importantly, we have to understand that with learning comes making mistakes, and that sometimes we do fail. But metacognition and regulation of our thinking will make us understand that failing is just the first attempt in learning.